All right, West Virginia fans, football season is still months away, but right now, West Virginia, a lot of the media and a lot of bookmakers are having very low expectations about our West Virginia Mountaineers. On today's episode, I'll break down those predictions, talk about how I feel about the expectations and where I see West Virginia landing this season. We'll also talk about the baseball team and their series coming up with BYU, and we'll talk about a former Mountaineer that's facing a suspension in the NFL. Before we do that, if you're a West Virginia fan, please remember to like and subscribe to Jersey Ear. We really appreciate all the support. You know, my last episode, we got a decent amount of subscribers from that one. So if you're new around here, definitely remember to like and subscribe to the show. It helps us create better content and keeps the fans engaged. So thank you so much for those who have followed so far, and definitely like and subscribe if you can. That being said, let's get into tonight's show. So, low expectations. You know, I've been noticing a lot of stories coming out from different media members, and I've seen this on X and I've seen this online about West Virginia's current win total on DraftKings and other books. And right now, it currently stands at 5.5 wins, which, you know, is concerning, right? You know, a lot of the times Vegas is right on that number or close to that number as we've seen over the years, and it has West Virginia fans feeling a certain type of way. Now, I personally believe right now with the transfer portal and the NIL situation, it's harder now than ever to predict teams' win totals, but this is just a glimpse of one book and what they view the West Virginia Mountaineers going into the season. If you also look at a lot of the media polls and a lot of way too early rankings, a lot of people don't have West Virginia ranked very high going into this season. So we're going to talk about that tonight. We have a comment already from Coop. He said, "Yo, Coop, how are you, man? Hope you're doing well. And thanks again for commenting on the show. We really appreciate it." So let's talk about why this is. Let's talk about why West Virginia is falling into these categories of low expectations and why a lot of people aren't hyping up this team. Well, the first reason is West Virginia hasn't been ranked in the AP poll since 2018. That stuff matters. You know, I think the two teams that have the longest streak of not making an AP poll from the Power Four are us and Rutgers, which is not good business to be in. So seeing your name with a ranking next to it is huge for national perception. And the fact that West Virginia hasn't really done anything in the last 7 years has people sleeping on this team, if we're being honest. And that's just the reality of the situation is, you know, not having a number next to your name, I think definitely hurts West Virginia. The other issue with West Virginia, and the reason why people aren't predicting West Virginia to have a good season as far as the total number of wins, is West Virginia has finished with a losing record 4 out of the last 5 seasons. So it's been a uphill battle between the Neil Brown era and the first year of Rich Rodriguez. And just post-COVID era, this team has not been able to win many games and not win games consistently and stack performances. And that's a major reason why there's low expectations. West Virginia really has to prove it on the field. You know, even though we might feel slighted as a fan base, and even though we get frustrated that there is no hype around this team, ultimately this team's going to have to win more games, can more consistently and beat some good teams to have a higher win total and to be predicted higher in the Big 12. Another major reason why the expectations are low and we see these numbers and these predictions is because West Virginia is in a total roster overhaul, guys. You know, last year they had 81 new players. I think this year they're going to have 83 new players. So if you look at the graphic here, they brought in a massive high school class of 49 high schoolers, and they brought in 34 transfers as well. So 83 new players this year, and it didn't necessarily work last year, obviously, right? With the 4 wins that you had last year, a lot of people are shocked that West Virginia has to go this route again with the major roster turnover to try to win some games this year. So I totally get why West Virginia has low expectations, if I'm being honest. I didn't expect anything else, you know, just looking at this, right? We have to prove it on the field. We have to get our brand back up to where it used to be. and it has to happen in a hurry. Otherwise, these expectations aren't going to change. You want to have high expectations going into a season. That's when the seasons are fun. We all remember the last time that we had high expectations as a program. Will Greer was at quarterback. We had David Sills. We had a really good defense coming back that year. It seemed like with a lot of the guys, David Long and guys like that on that defense. And we had high expectations. We were counting down until the Tennessee game. And right now, I'm just not sure if like the fan hype is there for this season. If we're just being transparent, right? Last year it was Rich Rod year one, and you had the Pitt game 9-13. Everyone's counting down to that. On this year's schedule, there's not really that Pitt game, and it's year two of Rich Rod coming off of a disappointing season, and you have again another roster overhaul. What is your expectations for the season, and what is your hype level going into this season? Because I feel like right now it's only March, and I'm sure it will go and it will simmer and get building as the season goes on. But right now, I'm just not feeling like the major hype around this program because of the low expectations, because of the major roster overhaul and the recent struggles. I think the media wants West Virginia to prove it, and I think our own fan base wants this football team and program to prove it in this new era. All right, let's talk about reasons, though, why I'm optimistic, why I think this football program can exceed expectations this year, why they can get it going in the right direction. So I'm going to lay out a few reasons here of why I think this team will exceed expectations this year, and they'll finish above that win number, and they'll have a solid season. So my first point here is year two of Rich Rodriguez, right? We all saw what happened in 2001 with Rich Rodriguez, right? He only won 3 games that year and had 8 losses, but you could kind of see it brewing towards the end of that season. They had a few momentum swing games, and you could see on the horizon that he was building something special, even in a 3-win season. Then he comes back the next year in 2002 and goes 9-4. Completely different program, completely different team. Can Rich Rodriguez have a similar result that he did in 01 and then that he did in 2002? Can we do that, 20 plus years later in this new era, this new landscape, and have similar results? I'm optimistic that he can. This guy has been coaching a long time. He's well respected in the industry, and I think he's going to get it going before we have another season like we did last year. So the question is, how many wins, right? Will it be 9? That'd be great. But for me, I would be happy with 7 to 8, if I'm being honest, especially with the win total only at 5.5. Can this team build off of last year, even though it was ugly, and finish with a better record? And you have to remember, except for that Texas Tech game, which was an absolute beatdown and embarrassment, leading up to that game, they actually played pretty well down the stretch in the football season. They beat a really, really good Houston team that was ranked in the AP top 25 on the road and got a win with a really young team with a freshman quarterback, a true freshman quarterback on the road. That was super impressive. And then the Arizona State game, they were right there in it. It came down to the wire. If they got that much, as Rich Rodriguez said, they would have been leaving Arizona State with a win. But again, you could see the glimpses of the future. They played TCU really tough at home, and Scotty Fox threw for over 300 yards. So there were glimpses last year, even though it was a throwaway season, even though it was a struggle of a season, that Rich Rod was getting this thing going in the right direction. So let's see what he can do. I think reason for optimism, 1, it's year 2. There shouldn't be that much of a change coming in year 1 coach compared to year 2. Hopefully they can really get it going with this one. All right, let's talk about the second reason why I'm optimistic that they'll exceed expectations. Guys, the injuries last year. I mean, that was just, you couldn't make it up with the injuries last year. I did a video early in the season talking about the running back room and how it was the most stacked room on campus and how that was going to lead the team. And then we found out pretty quickly that wasn't the case. You look at the injury to Jaheim White in just game 2, he was gone for the season. Ty Edwards wasn't eligible. And then when he was eligible, he had a great game, but then had a hip pointer. So we never saw him again. You saw last year we played with 5 different quarterbacks. Jaden Bray was injured the entire season. I mean, it was just as bad of an injury situation that I can remember. And I think it had a big reason why the team struggled so much, right? How many more wins would they have had if they were healthy? Who knows? Maybe one more or two more wins, but in that case, you probably make a bowl game, and the record doesn't look nearly as bad. So I'm predicting that they're not going to have nearly as much of the injury problems that they had last year. Let's pray they don't, because it was really hard to evaluate this team. Really hard to evaluate this team at all based on the injuries that they had last year. It's just the truth of the matter. Not to make excuses for this one, but the injury situation was so bad last year. I don't think that's going to be the case this year, and that should be another reason why they exceed expectations. Mr. John commented, John, good to hear from you, man. Thank you for commenting. We really appreciate it. Hope you guys are ready for March Madness. I'm watching the Lehigh Mountain Hawks right now play Prairie View. Lehigh is a team that's close to me, so happy March Madness to you guys. And let's go the women's team coming up. All right, reason number 3 why I'm optimistic for the season and why I think West Virginia can exceed expectations. Guys, this schedule just sets up really nicely for West Virginia. 7 home games this year, which is absolutely huge. Last year, West Virginia only had 5 home games. Now you get 7, so that's going to be absolutely massive. And you get 5 in the conference, which is great to see. So I think the schedule, especially in the beginning of the season, sets up really nicely for West Virginia. You go Coastal Carolina, UT Martin. Those should both be wins. Virginia is a neutral site game. So even though you have 7 home games, but you also have a neutral game too. So that's basically 7 to 8 home games this year. That should set up really nicely for a schedule. Now, Virginia had a great season last year. They won a lot of close games. Can Virginia have back-to-back seasons where they're stacking wins like that and winning close games? They have Bo from Beulah at quarterback. So it'll be interesting to see with him and Eli Holstein who wins that battle, but that's a winnable game. And then you get Oklahoma State and Iowa State who have new coaches coming in. So this should be pretty interesting, but I think the schedule sets up nicely. And I think the other thing is first-year coaches. West Virginia is going to face 5 of them next year, and we've seen that first-year coaches, especially in this league, have struggled. The Indiana thing is an outlier. Not many teams can be like Kurt Cignetti and win right away and have instant success. A lot of times there's going to be a transition and there's going to be a mass exodus of players, and it's going to take time to build your culture. Not always the case, but a lot of times, more often than not, teams struggle with first-year coaches. We saw it last year with West Virginia. So hopefully that happens here, right? We need a bad season from Iowa State. We need Oklahoma State to not get off and running with the playmakers that they have and struggle a bit. It would help West Virginia immensely to have some bottom feeders that you can get some easy wins over, because over the recent years, there hasn't been many bottom feeders in the Big 12. Each Saturday, you have to suit up and play your best. For years, it was Iowa State and Kansas. You could kind of chalk them up for wins. But over the last few years, that hasn't been the case. Iowa State, obviously, with Matt Campbell, really leveled up their game, and they were as tough as anyone to play. And then Kansas, even though the records haven't been great, we've seen what they can do. They exposed us last year. So they're the bottom of the Big 12. There isn't much of a bottom, and hopefully there can be some new bottom teams with the new coaches. So hopefully that helps West Virginia out this year. So I think the schedule sets up nicely. Drone Wolf said, let's go Mountaineers. I say 8-4 or 9-3 could be possible. Yeah, Drum Wolf, I don't think that's like too crazy, truthfully. I mean, if you look at the schedule, besides Texas Tech, which is going to be loaded again this year with the NIL money, and they proved it last year that they can play. Who knows with these other teams? You know what I mean? Like it's a lot of question marks, right? Can Arizona emulate the same success they had last year? Cincinnati lost Sorsby, so what does that situation look like when they lose a top tier quarterback like that? TCU is always a coin flip game. It's always a game that it goes back and forth. What does Kansas look like without Daniels? But they do get Kotelnicki back. Houston is on the schedule, but they have to come to Morgantown. And then Utah is another team going over a coaching change. So it's not crazy. It's not out of the realm of possibility to see a West Virginia team win 8 to 9 games next year. I don't think that's crazy. Even though there's low expectations, and even though the low expectations make sense, I could also see this team having a great season next year and winning, 7, 8 to 9 games. Drumwolf said, as long as we avoid being snake bitten by injuries like last year. So that's funny, Drumwolf. I'm not sure if you just came in, but we actually talked about that on the last slide, that I think one of the reasons why West Virginia will have better success this year and exceed expectations is because they're not going to have the bad injury luck that they had last year. I think that's a fair assessment and a fair point that you brought up and both I brought up. All right, let's talk about the last reason why I think that West Virginia will exceed expectations this year and finish above that win total. The offense just sets up better. Improved offense, right? West Virginia, the biggest flaw that anyone could see by watching this team was the offensive line play, right? It was abysmal last year, especially the right side of the line. There were so many times the quarterbacks were dropping back. They had no time to throw the ball. They had zero push up front. They got exposed many times. And when you can't run the ball in a Rich Rodriguez offense, it's just going to be a miserable day. They couldn't do anything last year. And it was really brutal to watch, if we're being honest. There was a few Saturdays where you were just hoping they can get the ball past midfield. That's how bad it was. But then it improved later as the season went and when Scotty Fox played. Now you're stacking the offensive line in front of him. You brought in a ton of guys like Wes King. You brought in Voss from Kansas State. You brought in Grayson from Jack State. You brought in Kevin Brown, who is a blue chip elite freshman. Plus you have Cray back and you have Livingston back. And I'm forgetting a few guys. This room really sets up nicely for West Virginia. It could actually be a strength of the team. So you could have one of the biggest weaknesses on the team last year to being one of your biggest strengths. And in order for this Rich Rodriguez offense to move and go fast, you need a good offensive line. They couldn't get their pace going last year because the offensive line was so bad. They were just having 3 and outs, and it was abysmal, like I said. So the offensive line should really help them this year with an improved offense. They make the coaching change. They bring in Rick Trickett. He's a legend. We all know him well. And I think that could change the culture around that room as well. Bicknell is gone. A lot of people weren't happy with the performance of the offensive line last year. So it was time to make a change. You bring in a guy that Rich Rodriguez is familiar with and who the Mountaineer fans are familiar with. It should be a good fit. And if that room can get it going and find 5 solidified, really quality linemen, this offense is going to improve automatically. Then you bring in Cam Cook. Cam Cook, guys, led the nation in rushing last season. He had 1,659 yards and 16 touchdowns. So that didn't happen by accident. This guy's an absolute beast. If you haven't seen his highlights yet, definitely go check them out. If there's one reason why I'm excited for this season, it's to watch Cam Cook play. He's absolutely electric. He'll run right through you. He breaks tackles, and he's just a bull. So I cannot wait to watch Cam Cook. And if the offensive line is as good as we think it's going to be, this offense can get rolling. Now, you also have the quarterback battle that's going to be happening this spring and in summer camp, and that's between Scotty Fox and Michael Hawkins Jr. So it's really a win-win situation here as far as I'm concerned. Scotty Fox, I think, can run this offense. We've seen him do it before. He threw for 300 yards a few times last year. You can see the home run ability with his legs and what he did against Houston and some of the plays that he had late in the season. He really started building a confidence as a true freshman. Now you have a whole offseason under his belt, and you give him a better offensive line. He could be he could take huge jumps next year in his true sophomore season. And on the other hand, you also bring in Michael Hawkins Jr., who started games in the SEC at Oklahoma and is really dynamic with the ball in his hands and will put his neck on the line to score touchdowns. So if you've seen his highlights, you know what type of player you're going to get with him. Competition should raise both of these guys' games. Either it's going to be Scotty Fox improved from year 1 to year 2, taking major jumps, so we're going to see him take off in this offense, or you're going to see Michael Hawkins Jr. beat out Scotty Fox, who ran the offense well, is going to be an upgrade at that position and a guy even better suited to run this offense. I'm just excited about this offense. I think there's no doubt the offense will be better, and I think that's why they'll exceed expectations this year. We have a few other comments from Drumwolf. He said, I think we are a dark horse this year. Yeah, like I said earlier in the show, until we as a program win more consistently, these low expectations aren't going to change. We have to prove it on the field. And I used to get upset about expectations. I used to see West Virginia in the bottom of the polls and get upset and feel a certain type of way. I'm like, you know what? It's fine. Like that's warranted. That's probably accurate, right? Do I think we're going to finish that low? No, but I also see why a media member would pick a team with 83 new players and a team that hasn't proven it in a while that has lost its identity, it's lost its swagger. We need to prove it. So I think the 5.5, we'll see what happens. Eric Flower said, I think 5.5 scares me. Vegas doesn't have. Yeah, it's funny you say that, Eric. Again, I mentioned this at the top of the show too. I think Vegas, that number scares me anytime. It scares me for my professional team too, the Giants. We have a new coach, Harbaugh, and the win total is not high for the Giants either. So you do get concerned. It's almost like it's a reflection of looking in the mirror, right? When you look in the mirror doesn't lie. And sometimes you look back at the mirror and you don't like what you see. The Vegas is almost like a mirror. You can hype the team up all you want and you can talk yourself into the team, but ultimately the expectation is going to be set by things like Vegas. So 5.5 does scare me, but I also think in this day and age, when there's 83 new players on a roster, I think these things are harder to predict than in the past. In the past, you would have returning starters, you would have a bunch of seniors coming back, and you could really predict this and get this going. I think with the number of injuries that West Virginia had last year, and I think with the roster turnover, they're just a really hard team to predict. If they don't get as injured this year, if the offensive line takes off, if they get good quarterback play, you get 7 home games, you get 1 neutral site game. I could see them crushing that number. But a lot of things have to go right. But let's see what happens. He said, Dremel said, Rich Rod looks different in the pressers. Yeah, Dremel, I actually mentioned that a few weeks ago during his first presser. I actually think Rich Rod looked more relaxed. Even though we've only seen him once or twice since spring ball has happened, that could always change. But it just seems like he's more confident with what he has in the room. And now that there's not a second transfer portal tampering window, they really know what they have. And they were able to have a full off season and really set up their transfer portal targets and their high school class. So I think they feel comfortable with what they have. And I think you see a more confident Rich Rodriguez. Let's see his next pressers and how it looks as the spring progresses. And like he says, yeah, looks more confident about this team. I agree. All right, let's talk about some baseball real quick. The baseball team is in action tomorrow. It feels like we haven't watched the baseball team for a while. They had a game that was canceled versus Penn State on Tuesday because in inclement weather. If you're in West Virginia, I saw it was snowing down there. There were some flurries up here in New Jersey yesterday, which is just, just tough. I actually just bought a Blackstone grill. And ever since I bought that Blackstone like a week ago, it's just been cold the entire time. So hopefully the weather gets nicer for baseball and for cooking and grilling out there. But anyway, that game was canceled versus Penn State. They're going to play Penn State 2 more times this year. One's going to be at Penn State. Another one is going to be a neutral site at Hagerstown, Maryland. But anyway, West Virginia is going to start the series versus BYU tomorrow. BYU has the religious belief, so they don't play on Sundays usually. So this is going to be a Thursday, Friday, Saturday series. They updated some times because there's more weather that's not looking great. So a 4:30 start tomorrow, a 2 o'clock start on Friday, and a 12:30 start on Monday. If you're like me, man, I'm going to have like multiple TVs going this weekend. It's going to be West Virginia baseball, March Madness on TV. The West Virginia wrestling team is going to be at Nationals starting tomorrow in Cleveland. So I'm going to be watching those matches. And then obviously the women's basketball team too. So there's going to be a lot of Mountaineer sports on this weekend, and there's going to be a lot of national sports on this weekend as well. You can see here the uniform selection. So a mixed bag of uniforms. You got the brand new Coal Rush uniforms that they updated this year. They're going to be wearing those, it looks like, tomorrow in game 1. So those should be really sharp to debut. Then they have the more traditional look of game 2, wearing the blue and gold cap there. And then they're going to go throwback to the throwback days, and they're going to wear the throwback uniforms on Sunday. So a mixed bag for uniforms. I think all 3 are pretty sharp. Drummel said, I got 6 inches of snow. Yeah, when you see snow in March, it's just annoying. It's just frustrating. Eric Flower said it's been 75, then it was 5, and tomorrow it's going to be 60, and Sunday it will probably turn I'll probably turn on the air conditioner. Yeah, that means we're trending in the right direction. Sometimes that winter lingers. All right, let's talk about the pitching and who's going to be on the mound for the Mountaineers this weekend. Pretty consistent rotation they've been throwing out. They've been throwing the same 3 guys out for the weekend series. Montesa is going to be the Friday night guy again. This is going to be a huge start for him, in my opinion, on Thursday, because he's usually the Friday night guy or the guy they give the ball first to. And last performance was not great for him. He had really tough time finding the zone and finding his command. He gave a lot of free passes out. I think he walked 6 batters and hit 1 or 2 more. So I think he let 8 guys get on base in only 3 innings. So he's going to have to really step up here to try to solidify his spot as the day 1 starter of a weekend series. So really, that's the number one thing I'm going to be watching tomorrow is how does Montesa look after struggling the outing before. Chasen Cole's going to pitch on Friday. He's had a solid season. He has a perfect 3-0 record this year with a 2.25 ERA. Looked really good last week, pitching 6 innings and doing really well for the Mountaineers and giving them a huge jolt after Montesa struggled the day before. And then Max Yehl, man, I cannot wait to watch him pitch on Saturday. He's must watch, man. Again, coming off of the Tommy John surgery, has had a really solid start to his season. He's 3-0. He has a 0.72 ERA. And last week he was phenomenal. He had pitched 8 innings and he had 12 strikeouts with 108 pitches. So he's electric. Like I said, he's a guy that's probably going to be pitching at the next level. So he's must watch when he's on the mound. So definitely looking forward to watching him. Drumwolf said, I like the throwback uniforms. Yeah, it goes back to the old field day. You know, when I was in college there, they played at the at Hawley Field, the old field, and it didn't have the same look of the new one. It feels like a little league park or a high school baseball park. Now where they play, it's a state-of-the-art facility. You see the biometric stuff they have at the new facility. I mean, and every time, you know, I go up to the baseball facility or I drive past it when I visit in Morgantown, I'm blown away with how much they've done around that park. You know, when my senior year was the year that it opened and I got to see some games there, and there was really nothing around there. Now when you go up, it has its own exit now. They have multiple restaurants, and they're really building that place into a special place. So just to see what's happened with the baseball team is awesome. So it's also cool, though, to look back and see the throwback uniforms of where they came from and where they're at now. It's always just a good reminder of that. And he said Mad Max. Yeah, man. West Virginia's had some really solid pitching over the last few years. If you look at some of the guys that we've put into the pros, and I think he's the next in line to really do that. So it's definitely huge for the Mountaineers. All right, let's end on a sour note. Our former cornerback Beanie Bishop was suspended for violating the NFL's substance abuse policy per source. So he's going to be out the first 3 games next year. Beanie, as you guys remember, had a great consensus All-American career after coming over from Western Kentucky and Minnesota to West Virginia. He was one of those portal hits that West Virginia had. He ended up going to the Pittsburgh Steelers undrafted, made some noise in camp and made the team and had a really successful rookie season. Last year, kind of got delegated to the practice squad, ended up signing with the Saints late in the season. Now he finds himself back with the Saints. Saints have been not great in the NFL the last few years, so it could be a chance for Beanie to make an actual squad this year, make the 53-man roster, but this is going to set him back a little bit, missing the first 3 games for him. So wish him well. You know, it's a bump in the road. It's all about how you handle adversity. If we know Beanie, he's always handled adversity well. He's always played with a chip on his shoulder. And if I'm a betting man, I would say that Beanie will get better from this and will redeem himself this season as he plays for the Saints. All right, guys, that's all I got. I really appreciate you guys coming in here, man. Drumwolf, Flowers, Coop, all you guys who continuously comment on the show, John. Really appreciate you guys. I really do. Again, if you're new here, if you're catching the replay and you like this show, definitely remember to subscribe. It definitely helps me out as we start building this thing and as we start trying to get to that 1,000 subscribers. That's the goal. So thank you again so much. We appreciate you guys. Enjoy March Madness this weekend. Let's go Mountaineers. We'll talk to you guys next time on the Jersey Ear Show.